We're the USC PA Day group. We're focusing healthcare education specifically for inner city children. These are our lovely faces. Our team is all the way in the back, and then the families and their children are in front of us. We're standing in front of Tommy Trojan, looking beautiful, smiling, happy. Okay, so the rationale of our program is really focusing on the principle that education has the most significant impact on improving quality of life and longevity. And so with that in mind, we wanted to provide an immersive experience for inner city kids to be on the USC campus while also cultivating an interest or inspiring an interest in medical careers. We had grade school children, and our event details consisted of a campus tour, educational workshop, dance class, and lunch.
So this is what we use for our literature support. The keywords we used for the search were adolescent development, healthcare education, and educational deficiencies. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the takeaways from the articles that we found. So the Community Preventative Services Task Force recommends center-based early childhood education programs to improve educational outcomes that are associated with long-term health, as well as social and health-related outcomes. If targeted to low-income or racial and ethnic minority communities, ECE programs are likely to reduce educational achievement gaps, improving the health of these student populations and promoting health equity. Research also found that COVID-19 exacerbated existing inequities in early childhood education, and in underserved communities, the learning loss discourse increased accountability for narrowly defined academic outcomes, as well as the expectations of student obedience and compliance. So this particular article that mentions this forefronts access to play and children's agency as an equity issue and offers early childhood educators strategies for advocacy and activism to infuse play and playful learning in their educational contexts. And lastly, continued research found that we must identify and operationalize the survival needs of children, which are both cognitive and emotional in nature. So a bridge can be built by personally connecting with the life worlds of children that can support them in specific areas with an empathy-based model. It can be structured with community participation by training social workers, volunteers, and other professionals, including teachers, to deal with the various needs of children. Next slide, please. These are the articles that we found. Won't go into detail. Next slide, please. And then health literacy. So this is how we incorporated it into our project. We use SMOG testing for pre and post test questions, which some of my team members will talk more about later. We also incorporated personal and organizational key health literacy findings, and these are straight from NIH.gov. So just as a gist, not to blame the individual, you want to keep the confirmation of understanding by continuing to ask questions and clarify, because anyone can be at risk for misunderstanding, even doesn't matter how educated they are. Next slide, please.
So when taking cultural humility into account, the three things that we really wanted to be inclusive on was our food, our music, and our pre and post questionnaire. So, it was to our knowledge that majority of our group was coming from the South Los Angeles area. And as far as the demographics go, a lot of them were Black. So we tried to consult with like local restaurants in that area that the kids would be familiar with, that they would more than likely take a liking to. So, like for example, one of the restaurants was Doolin's, which is very popular in South LA. It did not work out, but we were trying to be culturally competent and take that into account. But we ended up just getting pizza because we had kids and we're like, okay, let's not overthink this. Let's just let's have a pizza party. We feel like the kids would all really enjoy that, and they did. We got them snacks to keep their bellies full throughout the day, so it all worked out perfectly. Luckily, we had Miss Gladys on our team, who curated a beautiful playlist of songs that would be kid friendly and culturally popular amongst them. And just as Brooke was talking about, our pre and post questionnaire, we made sure that it was adjusted and was appropriate to the reading level for the group so that everybody would be understanding of the questions that we asked. Next slide.
All right, so I know we're all familiar with trauma-informed care, and although this doesn't directly apply to this event in particular, we can still get some of the concepts of empathy and apply to this event. So with that in mind, there are the groups that we work with, the schools, they had lower access to resources, funding, and time per student, and that can lead to a student feeling left out and contribute to a feeling of disconnect between the student and their education. So this event was focused on splitting up the children into smaller groups, focusing on them and making sure they understood and like they had a full experience in each of the workshops. So at that point, they might not have experienced this at this point in their educational career, but this can jumpstart what they can accomplish. And that was the goal we had in mind with trauma-informed practices. Next slide.
Okay, equity and inclusion considerations. These two concepts for a project starts with the interviews. We conducted interviews with librarians, educators, principals, and other community grassroots organizations in similar areas or some of the high schools that our students attended. So the idea was that all of these groups and partners can provide tools to make the process of learning about STEM and pursuing STEM careers more equitable. For example, one of the organizations we connected with, College Track, follows kids until they finish college and connects them with quality mentorship and opportunities so they can realize their full potential. So for us, it's kind of, or our project, it's working in this space and adding to the strength of the space that already exists. And we already kind of touched on the educational content and the food. But in addition to those things, having ADA accommodations and just being really prepared for the day helped us with equity and inclusion. Next slide, please. Okay, communication skills and advocacy. Our first community partner, Miss Liz of Pathways, was really a huge help for us. She secured the funding for almost everything that our event entailed, including parking and food. Both of those things increase accessibility overall and minimize transportation costs. And then Dr. V connected us to having anatomy models for the different workshops, which I think is super important because we wanted to advocate for the different learning styles, allow the kids to be hands-on, and this includes visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning. And we were able to do all of that because of our partners here. The Marshall School of Business gave us the opportunity to reserve a room within their space. And the room was great because it allows to have a multi-purpose center for the kids to do their activities. They have to run to the bathroom. That was easy. Catering our food and getting it up there was easy. And we were just able to do all of our planned activities. Finally, Miss Nong of Human Resources at USC was great because Brooke was able to connect with her and get some gift bags for all the students, including a great mug, a lunchbox, and just some fun other gifts. And I think this really just creates enthusiasm and excitement for possibilities that exist in the future. Next slide, please.
Okay, so with our pre and post questionnaire results, we understand the challenge of trying to engage children, but also conducting surveys. For us, it was very crucial for the process to be seamless, and I think we did a great job with that. In terms of the results, I'm thrilled to say that we achieved 3 out of the 5 goals. And we find this to be significant because it shows that our intervention had a positive impact in these children. For the goals that weren't met, it's important to consider the specific goals. For example, like not having STEM be one of their favorite subjects in school can be influenced by the fact that maybe they have their favorite teacher is in a certain subject. So it's something to consider. I think also moving forward with the pre and post survey, we would like to send the pre and post survey before the event actually happens, and then like right after the event, to see how much they actually retain after going home, um, rather than doing it like there on in the location. Um, and then let's move forward with the next slide, which goes over the goals that were met based on the survey. As I mentioned earlier, I am delighted to have achieved 3 out of our 5 objectives. Following our event, we anticipated that 90% of participants would have learned what a physician assistant is. And this was a fantastic result because while we were actually doing our tour of the campus, some of the kids were saying, oh yeah, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor. What are you? And when we said physician assistant, they're like, what is that? And so seeing how they were really excited to learn that there's all these different opportunities and options, that was fantastic. But overall, it was great to see all the, the objectives that we achieved. It shows that our event had significance on this participants, and the objectives that fell short, one of them being that the participants were already interested in medicine. So I think we increased their interest in medicine to 35%, but we didn't quite reach the 50%. We didn't anticipate them already being interested in medicine to begin with. So I think that's an objective that can be continued to work on in the future with future objectives or future events, I mean.
Although our event was definitely a success, we had some obstacles along the way. One was identifying a community partner. We were ultimately conclusive on establishing our own event. We had some issues with parking that was mentioned that was resolved with Pathways, as well as room booking, which was resolved with Pathways. Food was covered by Pathways, but finding the right spot definitely took some initiative on our end. And then as it pertains to weather and the rain, just being prepared with umbrellas, ponchos, and weather monitoring. Next slide, please.
So, what can we do moving forward to have efforts like this sort of be sustainable, or for programs like this to continue on onto the future? So, the first thing that we can do is just be huge advocates, right? We got to spread the word. I'm sure amongst the public there is a overwhelming lack of knowledge that education and health and poor health outcomes have some sort of a relationship. So, if we can spread the word via like social media or word of mouth, just talking to patients and their families if they come into clinic, trying to get their children interested and get them engaged with higher education, we can maybe help efforts like this go unnoticed. Making partnerships with programs such as Pathways would be huge. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. We can kind of join forces and join with programs that have established rapport with local schools, and go out and take kids from these schools. And we're lucky enough that we're in an area that has a ton of colleges within like a 60-70 mile radius, so we can expose children to different college campuses, and hopefully spark their interest in higher education and get them on the right path to living a life full of health and happiness. Lastly, funding is important. So, local schools may have grants and may have funds already set in place. So, if we can partner with them and take these tours, get out and expose kids, I think it'd be really beneficial for everybody. And then, to like getting out to our local officials, and possibly coming up with grants. Our local officials are very powerful and they can do things like this. So if we can get in their ear and advocate why this is so important, I'm sure that they would listen. And lastly, we're gonna have a short video of Gladys leading her dance.
There we go.
And that's our presentation.